Hello and welcome to Spotlight On, the companion podcast of thetonearm.com. Here we talk with musicians, writers, and innovators about the ideas shaping media, art, and culture. I'm your host, Lawrence Purrier. Today the spotlight shines on David Harrington, founder and violinist of Kronos Quartet. For 50 years, David has led one of the most adventurous musical ensembles on the planet. Kronos has commissioned over 1,100 works and collaborated with everyone from Philip Glass to Nine Inch Nails, and they've earned 3 Grammys along the way. Their recent Hard Rain project brought together nearly 50 artists worldwide to reimagine Bob Dylan's Nuclear Age anthem, while David's archive has just been acquired by the Library of Congress. David shares stories from 5 decades of musical exploration and why he believes musicians must listen to the world and respond with purpose. And now, David Harrington. Before we get into what's going on right now and what's coming up, I wanted to ask you a little bit about what I think of as like your trifecta with the Library of Congress and the archive acquisition, the inclusion of pieces of Africa and the National Recording Registry. Most interestingly, your appointment to the Kluge Chair in Modern Culture. And I guess first to start, what does it feel like and what does it mean to have your work sort of included with some of the, our sort of significant cultural artifacts of this country?
We're very proud that our archive, up to the point of last year, is now at the Library of Congress. And I feel like, as I told them at the library, I said, as far as I'm concerned, my work is I'm intending that you're going to need to send another truck out to San Francisco
in 50 more years,
in a few years, I mean, there's so much to do and there's so much that we want to do, building on what has happened over all of these years. But what I like is that, once it's all organized, then people that are interested in researching and learning more about some of the details of our work can have that public access.
Incredible.
One thing that I learned as scholar in modern culture at the Kluge Institute was what an incredible resource the Library of Congress is for our country and how few people actually know what you can learn there and what you can experience. It seems like it's just not very well known that you can get a librarian, so many of the different departments, on the phone, and you can talk to that person and you can ask your questions and you can have access to so much information that might be helpful in whatever you might be trying to do. So that's a long way of saying I'm really happy that a lot of our work is there. And in terms of the recording registry, I'm incredibly proud that Pieces of Africa is included. I showed my grandson the complete list of recordings that are on that registry. He was blown away. He's 16 years old and a big music fan. And of course, there's a lot of names that he hasn't come in contact with, but there's a lot that he has come in contact with. And it's impressive that, and basically you're lucky if you get one recording there.
Yeah.
I have to say, when I saw that the recording that I heard of George Crumb's Black Angels, there are only several recordings by string quartets that are on the recording registry. And one of them is the recording I heard in August of 1973, the New York String Quartet playing Black Angels. And it made me so happy. I mean, I would have liked our recording to be there, but I understand why the first recording of that piece belongs there. And that's why I started Kronos, was after I heard that recording. and,
Yeah.
and then to see it in the list when Pieces of Africa was there was really cool, I have to say. It was a great moment, and
Yeah.
yeah. And then the work I was able to do at the Kluge Institute and working with librarians from the American Folklife Center influenced the work of Kronos many years into the future. For example, one of the pieces that we're putting together we're calling it Three Bones. And Three Bones is a triptych, and the center of the triptych is some of our work with Gullah musicians and the Sea Islands music. And so one of the things that I was able to do while I was there was to get a recording that was made by Lorenzo Dow Turner in 1932. Lorenzo Dow Turner was the linguist that established that Gullah is a language. Part of his research was involved in doing a lot of field recordings of people speaking and singing. And there was a recording he made in 1932, an elder woman singing, and she did not know the language that she was singing. She knew the melody and she knew the words, but she didn't know what the words meant or what language they were in. And she had learned this from her mother, who had learned it from her mother. And then a few years later, 1940s, a linguist from Sierra Leone, Lorenzo Dow Turner, and Turner played the recording, and the linguist from Sierra Leone said, well, that's Mende, one of the languages spoken in Sierra Leone. But he didn't know the context of the song, and I don't think he knew all the words either. And so then a few years later, into the late 60s, I believe, anthropologist and a musicologist took the recordings to Sierra Leone and eventually found somebody that knew the song and could sing along. And it turns out that this song in the Mende language is a song sung by women at funerals. As far as we know, it's the only song in American music that exists in the original African language. In other words, it survived the Atlantic Passage and was passed from mother to daughter, grandmother to granddaughter. We don't know how many generations. Anyway, they have that recording, and we were able to get it. It's now in the most pristine audio condition it's ever been in. We premiered part of our triptych at Spoleto in June. Charlton Singleton wrote the surrounding music, and Quentin Baxter, Gullah percussionist drummer, joined us. That was one of the wonderful things I was able to do while I was there.
You know, it's so much comes out of that story.
I know.
That's just one song. It's so that to me really is a great representation of what it's like to be someone who loves music, how you can open one door and go down all these different hallways and end up in all these different places.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something else that strikes me here, as I was watching you tell the story, and our listeners won't catch this, but you were smiling the whole time. And that sort of goes into the second question I wanted to ask you, which was, and by the way, thank you for not correcting me on my horrible pronunciation, but I will now say it correctly, the Kluge chair. My sense is that it basically like gave you the keys to the candy shop.
Oh.
and I wonder, you spoke of, you can phone all these librarians and they help you navigate that universe. What did you, when you first picked up the phone, what was the first, like, did you have an agenda when you went in? Like, how does one start in that context?
I'm going to show you a photograph, and I know the listeners aren't going to be able to see this. So it was on June 25th, 2024 was my first day. I invited my daughter to come with me. She is a middle school, San Francisco public school, middle school librarian. And I thought, what better place to go? And so we were escorted down a big hallway, get lunch. And the first person that we met, I don't know if you know who that is, but that's Dr. Carla Hayden. Carla Hayden was the Librarian of Congress at the largest library in the world, right? My daughter Bonnie got to meet her, and so I was introduced by the guy that was escorting us, David Harrington, Kronos, and Kluge, scholar in modern culture, all this. And then I said, and here's my daughter, and Dr. Hayden said, oh, very nice to meet you, and then I said, this is my daughter Bonnie, and she's a middle school librarian in San Francisco public schools. And Carla Hayden said, well, she's the one I want to talk to. And yeah, it was a very proud dad moment. And they talked for about 10 minutes about kids' books and the importance of libraries and librarians and making books available for kids. And that's what Bonnie's been doing her whole life. I mean, she's kind of been a librarian, even though she was teaching third grade for 23 years, but then moved to become a librarian. And anyway, the commitment that she showed and just the respect for other librarians was so fabulous. And so when she got fired, I have to tell you, it really pissed me off because I was aware of how excellent she is as a public person, as a representative of books for our entire society. So anyway, I just needed to say that.
I felt that coming.
Yes, firsthand. And there was nothing in it for her. Career-wise, that's just her. What she does was so apparent as that's the first thing that happened at the Library of Congress that I can recall for me. And just learning to navigate even a little bit this incredible resource. It's not something that being there for 4 months I can't say that I know how to navigate the Library of Congress, but being around the scholars and the librarians and the collections was thrilling, and it just gave me a larger appreciation for what we have as citizens of our country.
Oh, where you been, my blue-eyed son? And where have you been, my darling young one? I've stumbled on the side of 12 misty mountains. I've walked and I've crawled on 6 crooked highways. I've stepped in the middle of 7 sad forests. I've been out in front of a dozen dead oceans. I've been 10,000 miles in the mouth of a graveyard. And it's a hard, it's a hard, it's a hard, it's a hard.
I think the word commitment is a great through line for a lot of what I want to ask you about.
Mm-hmm.
And one manifestation of that of commitment is social commitment,
Mm-hmm.
social engagement, music and art, not as something that simply exists in a conservatory or in a closed off way. If I had to characterize some of the things that Kronos means to me, I think about art in the world. Art in maybe popular spaces, democracy, if these aren't too highfalutin of things to say to you.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Hard Rain Project, which is what came across my transom and caused us to reach out to you, First of all of the incredible voices that are included on the project. I didn't want to name some at the risk of not naming all, but there's just some wonderful voices. It's such a joy to hear the way they're collaged and pop up. But I'm curious, how do you decide when a project needs to be at like this kind of collaborative scale versus just the intimacy of the quartet?
The way this began was that I got a call from Owen Gaffney in Stockholm, and he works with the Nobel people, and he asked me if Kronos would be interested in reimagining Bob Dylan's Hard Rains Are Gonna Fall. The initial idea was that we would play this in Stockholm at a concert we were doing in a decommissioned nuclear bunker in Stockholm. And we did that. And you can hear the singer, she's part of the recording. Sarah Parkman is her name. And so we premiered the song with Sarah. But as we were putting it together, it began to seem like it would be great to involve the world of singers, if we could, and the world of musicians. So it started out, like I say, as a performance with Sarah Parkman. At the same time, then we were thinking, well, let's see who else might be able to join us. There's a lot of chance that happens.
Yeah.
I got an email from Asha Bosley's son. Mom and I are in San Francisco. Would you like to meet? And you probably know we did an album with Asha Bosley 20 years ago, I think. And I thought, great, I can't wait to see Asha. I haven't seen her for a long time, and she's 92 years old. And anyway, I went down to the hotel and we met, and I asked her personally right then if she would like to be a part of this, and she said she would love to.
Yeah.
And her granddaughter was with her. And so the idea came up, well, wouldn't it be great to have the generations singing together? And so that's one thing that happened. Elia Einhorn, the co-producer, who's a real genius, I think, and Elia reached out to a number of musicians and singers, and we agreed that Allison Russell would be fabulous. And Elia was able to reach out to her directly, and in each case, it came from a personal connection, actually, each request. And so I don't know how much you know about the work that we've done over the years, but I was invited to curate the Carnegie Hall premiere of Terry Riley's In C some years ago. And I basically put the group together instrument by instrument and just made this orchestra. It took a long time to do this. It didn't happen and the same kind of thing happened with the Hard Rain. We've worked with Laurie Anderson. Well, I called Laurie about this, and she said, absolutely, I'm doing it. It's happening. The enthusiasm of so many members of the musical community, it was just inspiring. It was thrilling to be a part of this. And then to hear someone like Ocean Vuong, his voice is so beautiful.
It's incredible.
In fact, I just got off a call a few minutes ago. We're hoping that Ocean will join us in concert sometime. And Charlotte Gainsbourg, I mean, those are two of my favorite voices on the drone. Of course, I love hearing Iggy Pop, and
he brought the full Iggy
Willie
too.
Nelson.
He really did. So beautiful.
Yeah.
His voice is so beautiful.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. That's so beautiful.
And we've worked with Tanya Tagaq, the amazing throat singer from Northern Canada. We recently recorded an album with Penny Chandrarini from Java. And so anyway, these singers had to be a part. They just had to. So
fun. I often ask the artists I talk with about the role of place in their work and how place interfaces or interacts with their work. So I wanted to ask something similar of you because of your history with places like Seattle and San Francisco and other locations around the world. But more specifically, could you talk to me a little bit about like the power of recording your part for this piece in Japan?
Yeah. It came down to timing. In a certain way, it seems at this point, it seems like, well, of course, they planned that they would record their part in Japan for the resonance, the meaning, the poetry. That's not really how it happened. It happens schedule-wise. This recording got put together really quickly, by the way, and it was done. A lot of my work, co-producing, was done on tour and late at night and early in the morning. It was, I didn't really have the time to do it. I felt like the occasion of the 80th year since the detonation of a nuclear device and then the bombing of Hiroshima on August 6th, 1945, and then August 9th was Nagasaki. And July 16th was the Trinity test. There was going to be an assembly of Nobel laureates for the prevention of nuclear war in Chicago. And as you know, Chicago was where the Fermi Lab
Instrumental
was
in the development.
Yeah. And it's where the doomsday clock is. And Kronos was invited to play there. So the only way that we could get the recording done so that it could come out on the 16th of July was to record, to extend our tour in Japan, where we were celebrating Terry Riley's 90th birthday, extend it one day and record that final day in Japan. You know, when I look back, I think, well, there's something really perfect about that. And it was not lost on us, by the way, not at all. But it wasn't planned that way. It just had to be that way in order to finish it in time.
Wow. I mean, just to sit with that is pretty astounding. Like,
Yeah.
especially for a group of people that you work so much and you're in so many places over the course of any interval, a year, a few months, and to have it work out that way.
Yeah. And then, you know, when we actually did the concert in Chicago as the conclusion of the assembly of Nobel laureates and nuclear scientists, we had 4 speakers joined us. Several of them will be included on the vinyl release. So there will be 2 live performances from that concert.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, and so it'll come out on vinyl. We're working on that right now.
Wonderful.
And one of them is, I wish I could tell you his name right now, but a Japanese man who is reading a diary entry of a father and a husband who lost his wife and child at the Hiroshima. And this man was reading over Laurie Anderson's piece Flow. And it's as emotional as it gets. Let's just say that. Anyway, that was part of the concert. You know, you mentioned about place. And so our hard rain started in a decommissioned nuclear bunker in Stockholm. And then it came to the United States and was played in Chicago on the day that July 16th, 80th year since the first detonation. And so these timings and these occurrences are important.
Oh.
And, you know, I could think of other moments in our work over all these years where the timing, it seems really almost like it's part of the work itself. For example, we played in Yerevan, Armenia. We did a concert marking the 100th year since the beginning of the genocide. I don't know if you've heard that recording that came out this last year. I invite you to check it out. It's music of Mary Kuyumjan. And the album is called Witness. The closing track on that album is called Silent Cranes. And you hear voices of survivors of the genocide.
I will when we're done here, believe me.
Yeah, and I'll never forget being there performing for that audience on that day and playing that piece by an American whose family survived the genocide, emigrated to Lebanon, and from Lebanon, its civil war came to the United States. It's amazing how the generations and how certain people, these events resonate with them and create music. Mary well, you'll hear it. You'll hear it.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
It's amazing, David, because hearing you say that, the thought that came to my head was those moments, those synchronicities, those whatever you want to call them, have this ability to collapse the world and to cause you to realize just how small and intimate your experience on this planet can be, despite the vastness of it and despite the number of souls that have lived and will live. I was struggling to come up with the articulation of how to ask you this question, and I may stumble through it, but it's not what causes you to build works around these moments. It's more philosophically or artistically, what do you think and feel that the art is doing in those moments? What is the art doing for this commemoration of the atomic detonation and the devastation? What is it doing when you go to these places like Armenia, and I'm sure many other examples from your career? What is going on? What is the art doing?
I'm not sure we can always know, but in Chicago, what happened was, so not only were there 20 Nobel laureates in the audience, but there were nuclear scientists and there were members of the public and Kronos fans, and but what happened there was, for me and for Kronos and our future, was incredibly significant, because it felt like what we were able to accomplish is something I'd wanted to accomplish for the 51.9 years of Kronos up to that point. And that is that scientists and musicians would be in the same room doing the same thing. And these scientists had just spent 3 days fashioning a statement that then was published. I think you could read it in the New York Times, I think. The idea was that heads of states all over the world, this statement would be delivered by people that know the effects of nuclear war on life and on our civilization. And so we were there as musicians, and not necessarily only Kronos. It felt like we were representing all musicians. And so it was an incredible experience for me. It felt like we connected. When you think of music and then you think of science, they can seem very far apart sometimes, but they didn't seem far apart at all that night. So many conversations happened way into the night after that concert about, we've got to do this more. This is so great. Music was amplified us. It inspired us. And I can say that the conversations I had, for example, with Saul Perlmutter, who's one of the persons, Nobel laureate, but he's a violinist, by the way, but he's one of the ones that established that the universe is expanding. Just to be able to have conversations like that. And then Daniel Holtz, who organized the assembly, he and I were getting ready for an interview on Democracy Now! And the person that was preparing us was asking us questions. They probably wanted to see kind of thing we might say, or
Make sure you behave.
I kind of got the feeling like we were being checked up on just a little bit. But right during that conversation, Daniel looks down at his phone, and he's the guy that is in charge of the Doomsday Clock Committee, and he's one of the world's authorities on black holes. Anyway, he looks down at his phone. I saw it for myself. We just discovered 2 new black holes. And what other violinist of any quartet in the universe could say they were with the
That's amazing.
the authority on black holes, and they just discovered 2 new ones? Of course, later he said, they're at least 1 billion years old, but still.
Well, they're new to us.
New to us.
Yeah, it really is amazing to contemplate the places that music has taken you.
Yeah.
And the worlds it's revealed.
Yeah. And the reason I can't tell you much about this is I'm not sure, because it's something that's evolving. I'm spending a day with Daniel Holtz next week. We're going to go to the Golden Gate Park. I have a place there where I've had thousands of meetings. It's called the Fragrance Garden at the Stribing Arboretum. And that's where I like to have my meetings, outdoors and in the Arboretum. And anyway, Daniel and I who knows what might happen? Daniel is the kind of person that makes things happen. He's the one that made that assembly happen. Who knows? The next time I see you or talk to you, Kronos may be musicians in residence at the Doomsday Clock. I don't know, but something like that is going to happen. I can tell you that for sure.
We'll be back with more Spotlight On and David Harrington of Kronos Quartet right after this break.
After listening to this episode, head to thetonarm.com, our online journal covering unexpected music and culture. This week on The Tone Arm, Tortoise guitarist Jeff Parker revisits the making of his 2016 solo album, The New Breed. Banjo player Wes Corbett talks about assembling his friends and heroes for the recording of his new album, Drift. 2 members of the Flaming Lips discuss their new project, Brainwasher, and the freak scene in Oklahoma City. Canadian duo Funeral Lakes dive into themes of colonialism and climate justice in their anti-Western musical tales. And legendary guitarist John McLaughlin talks about the legacy of Shakti and his tribute to the late member Zakir Hussain. You'll find all this and more on The Tone Arm. And while you're there, be sure to subscribe to our email newsletter. That's thetonarm.com. The Tone Arm, putting a needle on the cultural wax.
And now, back to Spotlight On. Well, speaking of making things happen, something that it's like easy to roll off the tongue, but it's kind of staggering to contemplate, which is the number of works that Kronos has commissioned. I mean, it's almost like there's a whole other like parallel universe of the music business even that you all run. And I'm curious, I have a couple of questions around the commissioning, but has your process, or how has your process for identifying and working with composers changed as the Kronos project has grown over the years and evolved over the years? Like, is there a methodology?
Let's talk about the very first commission. And it doesn't start with, it starts earlier than it started. Things
Okay.
always do, right?
It's the story behind the story.
Yeah. Yeah. So when I was 16 in high school, I was in a group, string quartet, and we found ourselves playing a new piece, or actually going to the home of the composer of a new piece as it was being written. And that composer is Ken Benchoff from Seattle. Now, he's now in his, I think he's 92 at this point. But when I was 16, that's what I was doing. And at a certain point, we played the world premiere of Ken's piano quintet. And that concert was what hooked me on the process of assembling new pieces that nobody had ever heard. And by the time, we'd had several months of rehearsal and the piece was completed, I realized nobody else in the world except the 5 of us knew what this was about, and we got to share it with an audience. And so it's like this secret language that we got to reveal. And I just love that. And so then Ken became my composition teacher in high school. Okay. Then you fast forward a few years. My wife and I had come back from a year in Canada. I had accepted a job in the Victoria Symphony when I thought I might get drafted by the U.S. Army. When I had my physical, they didn't want me any more than I didn't want them.
The feeling was mutual?
The feeling was very mutual, but by then I'd signed the contract, so we went to Victoria. We're there for a year, and then we came back July, and in August, and I started playing quartets with various musicians around Seattle. We had the radio on, and that recording, Paul Zukovsky and the New York String Quartet were playing Black Angels by George Crumb. It was on the radio. I had never heard any music like that, and I had been trying to find my song, and there it was. The next morning, I found out who Crumb's publisher was. I called the publisher in New York City, convinced them they had to send me the music because I had to have it. I didn't even have it. Well, I don't think there were credit cards in 1973. If there were, I didn't have one. And anyway, I convinced the guy to send it, and I said, I will send you the money. Don't worry, I will. And anyway, he trusted me. Peter's edition arrived, Black Angels, a week later. I looked at the score, and I realized I've got to play this piece. That's all there is to it. I have to. And I realized I'm going to have to get a group together that will be committed to all the things involved in playing that piece. And I talked to my friend Ken Benshoff, and he said, well, I'm going to write a new piece for your group. This is before we even had a group. So Ken started writing what became traveling music. And you can hear that on Spotify if you want. It was recorded for the 25th anniversary box set of Kronos. The reason I'm talking to you today is because that piece was so beautiful, number one, and so much fun to put together as a group. The fact that Ken believed in me and the group even before we started rehearsing, and he made this piece, and it was just such a thrill to play. And that was in the spring of 1974 when we did the first commission piece. There was no money involved. I didn't have any money. It was just, he wanted to do it. I wanted him to do it. And I think I bought him a coffee and some donuts or something. That was it.
Oh, where have you been, my blue-eyed son? And where have you been, my darling young one? I've stumbled on the side of 12 misty mountains. I've walked and I've crawled on 6 crooked highways.
I've stepped in the middle of 7 sad forests. I've been out in the front of a dozen dead oceans. I've been 10,000 miles in the mouth of a graveyard.
And it's a hard.
And it's a hard.
It's a hard.
It's a
It's a
hard.
hard. It's a
It's
hard.
hard.
It's a
And
hard.
it's a
rain.
hard
Hard
rain's gonna
rains are gonna fall. But what did you see, my green-eyed son?
So I told you earlier some of the things I think of when I think of Kronos. And another thing I think of is relationships with some of the, even you mentioned Osha Bosley, and I think of Terry Riley, and there's, a list of people we could go through. that you've had affiliations with for so long. And I'm really curious about, again, it's a little bit of a balance question. How do you maintain all of those relationships while still staying open and making space for completely new? There must be so much intention that has to go into that.
Yeah. I didn't really answer your other question about how does it happen? And for me, it's a matter of a magnetic force.
Mm.
I got magnetized to Ken Benchoff's music at age 16. And then I became his page turner when he did piano concerts. And we became very good friends. And, he would always be playing new pieces for me on the piano. And so I saw his process. So that's how that relationship started. With Terry Riley, it was kind of similar, and it was related to Ken Benchoff because Kronos was at Mills College. We had just been appointed quartet in residence there. And what should we be rehearsing but traveling music by Ken Benchoff? When Terry Riley came into the concert hall, and I recognized Terry from his recording Rainbow and Curved Air. His photograph is on the recording. And so I looked over and I thought, hey, that's Terry Riley. And he said, oh, this is really great. What were you playing? And I said, well, the music of Ken Benchoff. Ken Benchoff, I went to college with him in the 50s.
Oh, come
That's
on.
what Terry said. Yeah. And anyway, that moment in would be the spring of 1977, I think, is when I first met Terry. And it took a couple of years for him to feel comfortable notating his music again. Basically, in every case with composers, it's a matter of finding the kind of moment or the conversation that can lead that person to feel comfortable. It took me 20 years to get Laurie Anderson to feel comfortable writing a piece for Kronos. But once I think something is important to do, I will not give up. So that's all there is to it. And in terms of new work with composers, like I said, if something it magnetizes me or anybody in the group where we just want to hear more of that person's music or more, then it seems like that person ought to work with us, ought to write for us. So I think that's one thing that is very consistent through all the years and all the people that we have worked with. I feel lucky, so lucky to have had Terry Riley as a close friend for 45 years. I couldn't imagine him being in Japan and having a 90th birthday and us not being there with him. And so
Wow.
Ayane Kozasa, our violist, figured out a way for us to be there, and it was great.
I want to be respectful of your time and our remaining time together. What I'd like to ask you in closing is, I have this paraphrase or this fragment of a quote of yours, and it has to do with you talking about wanting the quartet to, quote, tell the whole story, if possible, end quote. And I wonder, these last couple of years have been a lot about looking backwards, yet you're always looking forward. I'm curious what part of the story remains to be told.
Oh, we barely scratched the surface.
Beautiful.
That's the thing about music is it's none of us own it. We get to share it. Just this morning, I got a message from a composer living in Washington, D.C., transgender composer who is so upset about what's happening there and to our country. She wants to make a special piece for us as a response. She wants to do it right away. I think that, first of all, we're definitely going to do it. And secondly, it's going to involve some pre-recorded cello lines that her close friend, Andrew Yee from the Ataka Quartet is going to record. So there'll be multi-track Andrew Yee. Yeah, and Inti Figgis Vizueta is the composer. Kronos will have this response. And I'm feeling, especially after July 16th, that we need to step up to the plate in a new way. And it's interesting that this request came in this morning at 3 o'clock in the morning, by the way. And I just happened to be awake and I wrote right back, and here we go. And Inti has written 3 other pieces for Kronos, and she has an entire sound world that's very beautiful, I feel. I'm thinking that one advantage that you get from 50 plus years is that you get access in kind of a new way. And Inti thought of us right away and thought that because of the work that she's heard that we've done, not only with Black Angels, all kinds of anti-war pieces, telling the story of how Martin Luther King arrived at the I Have a Dream speech involving his close friend Mahalia Jackson, who was on the rostrum with him that day. And his lawyer and speechwriter Clarence Jones told the story, and I happened to hear it on C-SPAN, of how Mahalia Jackson called out to Martin Luther King after the beginning of the speech, and she called out and said, "Tell him about your dream. Tell him about your dream, Martin." And when I heard that, I realized that Mahalia Jackson, in that sense, she represented all musicians in such a perfect way, because Martin Luther King Jr. was her close friend and confidant. When he was down, he would call her up and she would sing to him. This is what Clarence Jones told us. And the night before the speech, he called Clarence, as was their process, and said, "Clarence, can you write some thoughts out for me for tomorrow?" So Clarence wrote out his thoughts. The time of the speech arrived, and the first 5 or 6 paragraphs were what Clarence wrote. But Clarence Jones doesn't say that he wrote the words of Martin Luther King. He says he heard them. And so Martin Luther King Jr. surrounded himself with musical people. And Clarence heard Martin Luther King Jr.'s voice. And then at a certain point, the speech veered off away from what Clarence had written. And then right after that is when Mahalia called out to him. And that's when he closed the book and looked out, and the speech went cosmic. And what I got from that is a musician's responsibility is to listen. That's what we can offer our families, our friends, our society, our world, is we listen to what's going on and we try to find responses. We try to find music wherever we can find it, and we try to create a community around us. And that's what Mahalia Jackson did. And one of our future albums is called Glorious Mahalia. And it's all recorded, and we're waiting for it to come out in the spring of 2026.
Thank you so much, David Harrington. And as always, thank you for listening to Spotlight On. If you enjoyed this episode, check out my discussions with Dorothy Lawson, Philip Golub, and Lisa Pegger. All 3 are available on spotlightonpodcast.com. Spotlight On is executive produced and hosted by me, Lawrence Purrier. We're produced and marketed by Michael Donaldson. Editing and sound design is by Terry Grant. Our theme music is by Q Burns Abstract Message. To support our work, please rate and review us wherever you listen to podcasts. For more interviews and writings from me, as well as a diverse array of contributors, check out thetonarm.com. While you're there, sign up and become a supporter. Thanks for listening, be safe, and stay in touch.